All right, let's dive into On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong.
Sounds good.
It's, well, not exactly your average novel, is it?
No, not really. It's more like a mashup.
Right.
Memoir, fiction, poetry, all rolled into one.
And framed as a letter from a son to his Vietnamese immigrant mother.
Exactly.
But here's the twist. She can't read.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think adds all these layers
Oh, absolutely.
of tension.
Definitely tension.
And intimacy to
Yes.
the...
So we're dealing with a story that's really about communication, but also about the barriers to it.
Yeah, and how we try to overcome those barriers.
I mean, have you ever felt like...
Or not overcome them.
Yeah, or not.
Sometimes you can't.
Like you couldn't fully express yourself, even if you shared a language.
All the time.
Vuong captures that struggle beautifully.
He really does.
And the book, you know, it's not a straightforward narrative.
No. It's more like snapshots,
Yeah.
memories, and reflections. Almost like you're flipping through a photo album.
That's a great way to put it.
One thing that really struck me was the son's struggle to teach his mother to read.
Oh, yeah.
He's trying to empower her,
Uh-huh.
but she resists.
She does.
She says, I don't need to read. I can see that it's got me this far, hasn't it?
Powerful statement.
It is.
About resilience,
Absolutely.
but also about different ways of knowing, you know.
Right.
She's found ways to navigate the world without traditional literacy.
Exactly.
Relying on her senses.
And her lived experience. It makes you question, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Those societal hierarchies of knowledge, whose knowledge is valued.
Right?
And whose is dismissed.
Exactly.
It's like she's saying, my knowledge is valid, even if it's not validated by the dominant culture.
It is. It is valid.
And then there's the son's role as the family interpreter.
Oh, yeah.
He uses his English to make his mother's voice heard in a world that often ignores or misunderstands her.
For sure. For sure.
It becomes central to his identity.
It does.
This act of translation.
Yeah.
He's constantly code switching, moving between languages and cultures. He even says he puts on English like a mask.
Wow.
To be seen and accepted code switching, you know?
That's fascinating.
It's something so many of us do.
I know I do it.
Whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah, for sure.
We adjust our language, our behavior, depending on who we're with and where we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever felt that pressure to code switch?
Oh, definitely.
It speaks to those power dynamics we were talking about.
It does.
Who gets to decide what's proper language?
Yeah, right.
And who has to adapt to fit in?
Who has to twist themselves into a pretzel to, to try to belong?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the son, that adaptation is tied to survival.
Right.
It's about making sure his family is understood and protected.
It is.
There's this recurring phrase in the book, what's good?
Oh, yeah. What's good?
That people in their Hartford community use.
Yeah. It's more than just like a hey, what's up?
It's more than just a greeting.
It's a way of checking in on each other.
It's acknowledging the shared struggles.
Yeah. It really speaks to the economic realities of their lives.
Right.
That day-to-day grind.
And it makes me think about how language can be a form of resistance.
It can be.
A way of creating community and solidarity.
For sure.
In the face of hardship.
Absolutely.
And that's especially poignant, I think, when we consider the impact of trauma on language. Vuong describes his and his mother's shared Vietnamese language as a time capsule.
I like that.
It's like their language is frozen in time.
Yeah.
Shaped by his mother's limited education due to the war.
Right.
Her vocabulary reflects a specific moment in history.
It does.
Marked by loss.
Yeah.
And displacement. And that limited language becomes a barrier.
It does.
To expressing the full extent of her experiences. Particularly when it comes to talking about the war.
Right.
The trauma is there, but the words to articulate it
they're just not.
Are missing.
They're just not there.
And that leads us to those incredibly vivid and heart-wrenching descriptions of his mother's childhood in Vietnam.
Like that scene with the bombing?
Yes. That scene where she describes the bombing of her schoolhouse.
So powerful.
It's haunting.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of how war can shatter a child's world.
It really is.
And those experiences clearly shape her mental health.
For sure.
And her relationship with her son.
Yeah. We see those jarring juxtapositions.
You know, before we dive into that,
I
think it's helpful to just kind of explain what juxtaposition means.
Oh, good idea.
For folks who might not be familiar with the term.
Yeah, sure. Juxtaposition. So that's like a literary technique where you have two contrasting elements side by side
Okay.
to highlight their differences.
Right.
Or create a specific effect.
Okay.
Think of it like putting a bright light right next, like a deep shadow.
Okay.
And the contrast makes both of them stand out.
Yeah.
I like that, yeah.
So it's all about contrast.
So when we talk about the juxtaposition of tenderness and violence
Right.
in the mother's relationship with her son, we see this play out in
all the time.
Scenes where she might lash out at him one moment.
Right.
And then express love and concern the next.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a confusing and difficult dynamic for a child to navigate.
It is. It is.
And it makes you wonder how those conflicting emotions, that push and pull between love and pain, how that might be tied to her own trauma.
Absolutely. It's got to be.
Have you ever experienced those kinds of conflicting emotions?
Oh, yeah, of course.
In a relationship where you felt both love and hurt at the same time?
I think that's something most of us have felt at some point in our lives. It's the complexity of human relationships,
right?
Especially when they're shaped by difficult past experiences.
Especially them.
Vuong doesn't shy away from those complexities.
No, he doesn't.
He shows us the messy reality of their relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
The ways in which love can be both a source of comfort and a source of pain.
Both, yeah.
And it's within that complex dynamic that we're introduced to Trevor.
Yeah, Trev.
The son's first love.
Right.
Their relationship is passionate.
It is.
But also fraught with challenges.
Definitely, definitely.
Shaped by societal expectations, addiction,
right.
A sense of desperation.
Yeah, a real sense of desperation.
What struck me was the scene where Trevor performs oral sex on the son after he's injured during sex.
That's a powerful scene. It's a difficult scene.
Yes.
It's a moment that defies easy categorization.
He does.
It's about desire, vulnerability,
right.
The strange form of caretaking, all tangled up together. It makes you think about the blurred lines between intimacy and violence.
It does.
And how those lines can become even more blurred when you're dealing with trauma.
In addiction.
Right.
It's definitely a scene that stays with you.
It does.
It makes you question assumptions that we often make about masculinity and vulnerability.
It does. It challenges those assumptions.
And, it's a good reminder that Vuong is constantly challenging assumptions throughout the book.
He is.
He's not afraid to explore the full spectrum of human experience.
That's right.
Even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Yeah, even those parts.
And speaking of uncomfortable, let's talk about this recurring motif of beauty and replication in the book.
Okay. Yeah.
Vuong uses flowers, especially the purple flowers the son picks for his grandmother, to explore this idea.
What's so fascinating about that is how it connects to the very act of writing.
Oh, interesting.
He's picking the flowers to preserve their beauty.
Yeah.
Just like he uses writing to hold on to these memories.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about trying to capture something fleeting and make it last.
It makes me think of that powerful quote about the human eye being God's loneliest creation.
Oh, yeah.
It speaks to the limitations of perception, right?
It does.
How we can see so much, but still feel this sense of isolation and longing.
It's like the eye is this symbol of both our connection to the world and our separation from it.
Right.
We see everything.
We see it all.
But we can't hold on to any of it.
And that ties back to the idea of replication.
It does.
Right, trying to create something that will endure.
Yeah.
But even as we try to replicate beauty, we also have to acknowledge its impermanence.
We do. It's fleeting.
It is.
It's there and then it's gone.
And that tension between permanence and impermanence is something that Vuong explores throughout the book.
He does.
Particularly in his depiction of the American experience. Now, he paints a very stark picture.
He does.
Of the contrast between affluent suburbs and impoverished neighborhoods in Hartford.
It's a powerful commentary, I think, on economic disparity and the very different realities people inhabit within the same city.
Within the same space, even.
And that disparity is even more pronounced.
It is.
When you consider the family's experience as immigrants. They face racism.
Yes.
Financial hardship.
Right.
A constant struggle to make ends meet.
Just to get by, yeah.
And it's within that context that we see this fascinating parallel emerge between Tiger Woods and his father's connection to Tiger Fong, a Vietnamese soldier he befriended during the war.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting connection.
It's a detail that seems initially out of place.
It does. It does.
But it speaks volumes, I think, about the complex legacies of war and the unexpected ways in which our lives intersect.
Right. Those strange little connections.
It's like Vuong is saying, look, even something as seemingly American as professional golf is touched by the history of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It makes you realize how interconnected our world truly is.
It does.
Even across continents and cultures.
We're more connected than we think.
And those connections become even more personal when we learn the truth about the son's grandfather, the man he knew as his grandfather.
Right.
Paul wasn't his biological grandfather at all.
Wow.
His mother reveals that she was already pregnant when she met Paul in Saigon.
So that really throws his whole sense of identity into question.
It does. Yeah. It's a bombshell revelation.
It is.
It completely shatters the son's sense of belonging.
It does.
The father he never knew is an anonymous American soldier.
Right.
Another phantom from the war.
Another ghost, yeah.
It makes you think about how the past can continue to haunt us.
It can.
Even when we're not fully aware of its presence.
Even when we try to bury it.
Yeah.
It finds a way to come back.
And it adds another layer to the complex relationship between Vietnam and America. The personal intertwined with the political.
Absolutely.
This seemingly private family secret is suddenly connected to these larger historical forces.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It's a powerful reminder that our personal stories are always shaped by those larger historical narratives.
Always, yeah.
That revelation about the son's grandfather really throws his whole sense of identity into question, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. Like, who am I? Where do I belong?
You know, it makes me think about how we all construct these narratives about ourselves and our families.
Yeah.
And how those narratives can be disrupted.
They can be completely shattered.
By unexpected truths.
Yeah, sometimes it's like pulling the rug out from under you.
Exactly.
But sometimes, those disruptions can be good.
Okay, how so?
Well, they can force us to kind of re-examine our assumptions.
Right.
To confront those complexities of our past.
And that's something Vuong does so well.
Oh, he's a master at it.
He doesn't shy away from those messy, complicated realities.
The raw, the real.
Of family relationships.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that really struck me was these recurring scenes.
Yeah.
Where violence and tenderness exist side by side.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the time his mother hits him and then takes him to McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
It's so jarring.
It is. It's like whiplash.
But it reflects those complexities.
It does.
Yeah. She's capable of both harm and love.
Right.
And her actions are often driven by her own trauma.
And her own struggles.
Exactly. And we see this again in the scene.
Yeah.
Where she forces him to drink a lot of milk.
Right.
Believing it will make him look more American.
Oh, gosh. That's heartbreaking.
It is.
And so poignant.
It's like she's trying to erase his otherness. To make him blend in.
Yeah.
Even if it means sacrificing parts of himself.
Right.
And that ties back to those themes of assimilation and the pressure to conform.
Especially for immigrants.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that question like, how do we navigate those pressures?
Right.
While still holding on to our own identity?
It's such a complex issue and one that I think so many people can relate to.
Absolutely.
Even if they haven't experienced immigration directly.
Yeah, it's about feeling like you have to change.
Adapt.
Yeah, to be accepted.
Speaking of richness and diversity,
okay,
let's talk about that scene with the oxtail.
The oxtail, okay.
It seems like such a simple moment, but it's packed with meaning.
What happens? Remind me.
So the mother and grandmother go to the store to buy oxtail for a traditional Vietnamese soup.
Right.
But they can't communicate what they need in English.
Right, that language barrier.
Your language barrier. Yeah. And the son, as the interpreter, feels this immense pressure.
He does.
To bridge that gap.
To translate.
But he doesn't have the right words.
Oh, that's frustrating.
It is. Yeah. And he feels ashamed.
Yeah.
And helpless.
I can see why.
It's such a perfect encapsulation.
It is.
Of those linguistic barriers immigrants face.
For sure.
And the son's struggle to navigate.
Between those two worlds.
Between those two worlds, exactly.
Right.
He's caught in this in-between space.
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of both his Vietnamese heritage and his American identity.
Such a tough spot to be in.
It is.
Yeah.
And they end up leaving the store empty-handed.
Oh, no.
Defeated by language.
That's so sad.
But
it's also so real.
It is.
For so many people.
And it speaks to this broader theme of cultural disconnect. You know, they're
Right.
literally surrounded by the ingredients
Right.
for their traditional dish,
Yeah.
but unable to access them.
Because of language?
Because of language.
It's like, they're right there.
Right there.
But they're also a million miles away.
Yes, and it makes you think about all the ways we can be excluded.
Or marginalized.
Even in seemingly mundane situations. And it brings us back to that idea of what's good.
Right.
As a way of connecting.
Across those barriers.
Across those barriers, yes.
Finding those moments of understanding.
Shared understanding.
Even when words fail us.
Even when words fail.
Yeah.
And, you know, Vuong also uses these beautiful, almost dreamlike descriptions of nature to kind of explore those themes of connection and separation.
Like those monarch butterflies.
Yes! The monarch butterflies,
beautiful.
They take on so many layers of meaning.
What did you see in them?
At first, I saw them as representing, you know, the fragility of life, the ephemeral nature of beauty.
Right.
But then the son imagines them fleeing the napalm attacks in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Which adds this whole other dimension of escape and survival.
Yeah, like their migration becomes a metaphor.
Yes.
For his mother's journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the trauma she carries with her.
And the way he connects those butterflies to the bombing of the rice paddies. Right.
Where the first professional golf course in Vietnam was built.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it creates this link.
Between destruction and creation.
Yes.
Past and present.
It's like he's saying that even in the most beautiful and seemingly innocent places, there are these shadows of violence and loss.
It's always there, lurking beneath the surface.
And that brings us to another striking image.
Okay, which one?
The deer in the fog.
Oh, yeah.
Where one seems like the unfinished shadow of the other.
Right. It makes you think about perception and reality.
Yeah.
Like, are they separate beings?
Right.
Or are they, you know, interconnected? Inseparable.
It makes you question what you're seeing.
Exactly.
And how our perspectives shape what we see.
They do. They really do.
And how memories themselves can be fragmented.
And incomplete.
And incomplete, yes.
We only remember pieces.
And it ties back to this idea of the book as a collection of fragmented memories.
Right.
Yeah.
Where those lines between reality and imagination are often blurred.
Intentionally blurred, I think.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
And I love that. The way he plays with those blurred lines, it's like he's inviting us into his own process of remembering and reconstructing the past.
It's an invitation to question everything.
Speaking of subjective experiences.
Okay.
There's that scene with the hummingbird.
Oh, the hummingbird. Yeah, what about it?
Where the son teaches his mother the English word for it. But she forgets it.
She does.
She does.
Oh.
But then she buys a hummingbird feeder.
She does?
Yeah, and she recognizes the bird by sight.
Okay.
Even though she doesn't have the word.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is, right.
It shows that language isn't always necessary for understanding.
Or connection. Yeah. It's like she's saying, I may not have the word, but I know this creature. I see its beauty, and that's enough.
It's enough, yeah.
It really speaks to the power of observation.
Observation, for sure.
And experience and nonverbal communication.
Sometimes words just get in the way.
They do.
Yeah.
No, one of the most heart-wrenching parts of the book for me was the scenes with the son's grandmother, Lan.
Lan, yeah.
She's this incredibly strong but deeply troubled woman.
Right, she's been through so much.
Who fled to Saigon during the war.
Right.
That scene where she describes having to leave her baby with a stranger during a bombing raid.
That's just devastating.
It broke my heart.
I know, I can't even imagine.
Such a powerful example of those impossible choices.
Right, those impossible choices.
That people face during wartime.
Yeah.
And the lasting impact.
Those choices stay with you.
They stay with you.
Forever.
And those choices continue to haunt her.
They do?
Even after she escapes Vietnam.
Right.
Makes it to America.
The trauma doesn't just disappear.
No, it doesn't.
Lingers.
We see that in her reaction to the fireworks.
Oh.
It triggers a flashback to the war.
Oh, right.
It's a heartbreaking reminder of how trauma can resurface unexpectedly.
Even years later.
Even years later, yes.
It's not something you just get over.
It stays with you.
Buried deep inside.
Waiting for the right trigger.
Yeah, that trigger can be anything.
And that's why those moments of tenderness between Lan and her grandson are so powerful.
They are.
Like the scene where she comforts him after the fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
Holding him, humming, "Happy Birthday."
Happy birthday.
The only English song she knows.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It is. It's a moment of pure love and solace.
Yeah.
Amidst all this chaos and fear.
It shows the depth of their bond.
Yes.
And her instinct to protect him.
Even when she's struggling herself.
Even when she's falling apart.
And then, of course, there's the scene where she tells the story of the son's conception.
Right.
Revealing that his father was a white American serviceman.
Wow, another bombshell.
Another bombshell, yeah.
It's like layer after layer of revelation.
And it changes their understanding of their family history.
And it does.
It also adds another layer.
Yeah.
To the complex relationship between Vietnam and America.
Right.
The personal
intertwined with the political.
Lon's decline and eventual death from those infected bed sores.
Oh, man, those scenes were hard to read.
Incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It's such a stark and unflinching portrayal of the realities of aging, illness.
And the limitations of medical care.
Especially for those from marginalized communities.
It's a reminder of how fragile life is.
It is.
And how important it is to cherish those we love.
And that scene where they bury Lan in Vietnam, and the son uses his laptop to show his grandfather her grave.
Oh, wow.
So moving.
It is. It's like they're trying to bridge that distance between them.
The geographical and the emotional distance to connect the past and present.
To find some closure. And then there's the trip to the mall.
The mall, okay.
It seems like such an ordinary activity.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
But it becomes this really poignant reflection on their lives.
How so?
Well, the contrast between the affluent shoppers and their own limited means.
Yeah.
It's so stark.
It's that economic disparity.
Yes.
Right there in your face.
They buy a small bag of Godiva chocolate.
Godiva chocolates, okay.
Which becomes a symbol of...
For small indulgences.
Yeah.
With those little joys.
It's a reminder that even amidst hardship, there are still these moments.
Little moments of beauty.
Of beauty, yeah.
Connection.
Big connection.
Even when things are tough.
Throughout the book, we also get these glimpses into the son's own experiences with violence and trauma.
Yeah.
Like the time he's bullied in school.
Oh, yeah.
And forced to say the name of his tormentor.
That's a tough scene.
It's a tough scene.
Bullying is so awful.
It is.
Especially at that age.
The way he internalizes their laughter, their cruelty, it just speaks to how trauma can become embedded in our very being.
Right. It becomes part of who you are.
Yeah.
At least for a while.
And then there's that incident where his mother tells him to stop crying.
Oh, no.
After he's slapped, saying, "Nobody touched you yet."
That's chilling.
It's chilling, right?
Yeah.
And it reveals her own distorted view of violence.
Right, her own experience.
And her inability to really understand his pain.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. It underscores his need to navigate a world that often feels hostile.
And uncaring.
And uncaring, yes. And we see his strategies play out in his relationship with Trevor.
Right.
Which is both a source of comfort and a potential path to self-destruction.
Right. Those two sides.
Their shared drug use, the reckless driving, the constant threat of violence from Trevor's father.
It's all very intense.
It's all very intense, yes.
Yeah.
It's like they're both trying to outrun their pain.
Yeah, trying to escape.
But they end up running towards it instead.
Sometimes that's what it feels like you have to do.
And then, of course, there's the tragic end.
To their relationship.
With Trevor's death from a drug overdose.
It's a loss that leaves the son reeling.
It does.
Grappling with all this grief.
Guilt.
Yeah.
It's that painful realization that he couldn't save Trevor.
Right. That helplessness.
It's a reminder of the destructive power of addiction.
It is.
And the fragility of life.
Especially for those living on the margins.
And it speaks to this broader theme of loss that permeates the book. Right. The loss of family, of love, of language, of a homeland.
It's all there woven through the story.
Now, running parallel to these very personal stories is Vuong's exploration of the American experience, specifically through the lens
of immigrants.
Of immigrants, yes.
And working class communities.
And working class communities, yes. And he doesn't romanticize it.
No, he doesn't.
He shows the harsh realities
Of poverty.
of poverty, yes.
Racism.
The struggle to make ends meet.
Just to survive, yeah.
That scene where the son works on a tobacco farm
Oh, yeah.
alongside migrant workers.
Backbreaking work.
It is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful.
It is.
It's backbreaking labor.
Yeah.
There's this constant sense
Of exploitation.
of exploitation, yes.
Yeah.
And it's such a stark contrast
It is.
to those idyllic images of rural America that we often see.
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses.
Vuong shows us that underbelly of the agricultural industry,
Mhm.
the reliance on cheap labor,
Right.
the desperation of those who are willing to work in grueling conditions just to survive,
Just to put food on the table.
and the way the son learns to communicate.
With the other workers?
Yeah, primarily through those Spanish phrases.
Like lo siento?
Like lo siento, yeah.
Meaning, I'm sorry.
It highlights the power of shared experience.
It does.
Right. And the ways in which language can be a tool for both connection and apology.
It's fascinating how language can be used in so many different ways.
It is.
Yes.
And it's a subtle but profound commentary, I think, on the immigrant experience.
I agree on the immigrant experience.
They're constantly apologizing
They are.
for their presence,
For their lack of fluency.
taking up space.
Taking up space, yeah.
In a country that doesn't always feel welcoming.
And then there are those scenes in Hartford
Okay.
where the son wanders the streets at night,
Yeah.
observing the lives of those around him.
It's a different world.
It is.
Yeah.
He describes the lexicon of losers,
Lexicon of losers. Wow.
the shared language of hardship and survival
Yeah.
that permeates the community.
You know, it makes you think about how poverty,
Mhm.
marginalization, they create their own forms of communication.
Their own ways of understanding the world.
Yeah.
It's a world that often goes unseen
Unheard
and unheard, yes.
by those in power.
And that's why stories like Marcia remind me.
The woman who goes door to door gathering signatures for a stop sign
Right.
after a child is killed.
That's such a powerful story.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a small act of resistance.
A way of trying to make a difference.
In a world that often feels indifferent.
Yeah, it's that fight for some kind of control
Yeah.
in a world that feels out of control.
It's a powerful testament to the human spirit.
It is.
That desire to create order and safety, even in the face of chaos and loss.
Even in the face of tragedy.
It's a hopeful note.
It is.
In a book that's often filled with sadness and despair.
Yeah, it's like a little flicker of light
Yeah.
in the darkness.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
there are still these glimmers of hope,
Right.
moments of beauty
And acts of courage.
that can inspire us to keep going.
To keep fighting.
So much of On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous, has been about beauty.
And how we try to hold on to it.
Yeah, like this urge to preserve something precious.
But fleeting.
Oh yeah, that feeling that something's slipping away.
We see it with the son.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to capture his mother's stories.
Right. To preserve those memories.
To remember his grandmother.
To make them last.
To find some kind of permanence.
In a world that's constantly changing.
It makes me wonder, have you ever felt that urge?
Oh, of course. All the time.
To preserve a memory.
Yeah.
Feeling
a moment.
A moment in time. Like, what are the things you try to hold on to?
Well, through photos.
Okay.
Writing things down.
And for the son, it's writing.
Yeah, writing becomes his way of making sense of things.
Of finding beauty in the midst of pain.
Right, of creating something meaningful out of the chaos.
And connecting with others.
Who might understand what he's going through.
And Vuong's writing, the way he writes.
It's just so powerful.
It is.
So lyrical.
It's like he's trying to create a kind of permanence.
Out of the ephemeral.
To find beauty in those dark corners.
Enough human experience.
The parts we don't like to talk about.
He writes about the need to replicate beauty. To extend it through space and time.
It's like he's taking these fragments.
Yeah.
These shards of memory.
Love.
And weaving them together.
Into this tapestry.
That's both beautiful and heartbreaking.
And he does it with such honesty.
And vulnerability.
It's like an invitation.
To the reader.
To look at our own lives.
With that same honesty.
That same vulnerability.
To really examine those difficult parts.
So the ending of the book, both beautiful.
And haunting.
Right. The son returns to Hartford.
Okay.
Walks the streets he used to wander as a teenager.
Reflecting on it all.
Like he's come full circle.
Trying to make peace with the past.
And then that final scene.
The one in the park.
Where he imagines his mother walking away from him.
Her pink shirt fading in and out of the shadows.
Such a powerful image.
of separation and connection.
Letting go.
Holding on to those memories.
It speaks to the complexity of those family relationships, right?
Absolutely. The people we love, they shape us.
But we also have to find our own paths.
Our own way.
Our own identities.
Even as we move on,
Yeah.
those bonds, they stay with us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into On Earth, we're briefly gorgeous.
What stays with us?
What are the things we're taking away?
For me, it's the power of language.
Yeah, okay.
To both connect and divide us.
The lasting effects of war.
And trauma.
How they ripple through families.
And communities.
Yeah.
Across generations.
The complexities of love.
Finding beauty in the midst of pain.
And that our personal stories
are shaped by history.
By those larger narratives.
Whether we realize it or not.
And I think it's a challenge to all of us.
To be honest with ourselves.
Vulnerable.
To ask those hard questions.
To sit with the uncomfortable truths.
And find that beauty even in the broken places.
Think about your own mother tongue.
Yeah, the languages you speak, the languages you've lost, the languages that have been silenced.
How have they shaped you?
What are the stories you haven't explored?
Write a letter.
Even if you never send it.
Use Vuong's work as inspiration.
To dive into your own experiences.
Find the beauty in the everyday.
That's what it's all about.
This has been our deep dive into On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous.
A powerful book.
We highly recommend you check it out.
You won't regret it.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.